Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to be doing what my thoughts were on my 2021 reads. I only have 9. I did start reading like June, I think it was. So I only have 9 books, so I'm not going to do a favorites of 2021. I'm just going to go through all of them and then I'll mention which ones were my favorite when I get to them. Okay, so the first book I read was The Mothers by Britt Bennett. This book is about Nadia Turner. She's in her senior year of high school. She just recently lost her mom. And she starts dating the local pastor's son, but because they're very different people, people have very different views about them, they end up not taking the relationship very serious, end up keeping it pretty low-key, and they have like a serious situation happen to them where they have to make a serious decision, and then after that they just kind of break up. And in her last summer before she leaves to college, she ends up meeting her best friend Aubrey. She gets really close to Aubrey and then she leaves off to college, kind of lives her college life. And then when she comes back, she ends up finding out that Aubrey is now dating the pastor's son as well. But like I mentioned, they kept everything very low key. And so Aubrey doesn't know that she's dating her best friend's ex. And so now that they're adults, they kind of are dealing with those decisions of like, they didn't think they were going to be in each other's lives after they broke up. And they are through this one person, which is his girlfriend and her best friend, and just like the decisions and the choices that they make going on from that. This book kept me hooked because I'm a nosy person and this book had some tea. So there's a lot of decisions that are like, damn, like y'all really did that. I would say it's like pretty quick pace. There's some parts that get slow, but it's really because of character building or friendship building where the author did a really good job of building the characters and building their friendships. So when certain things happen, you do feel for them or you are shocked by it, instead of like when you don't really get connected to a character and something happens, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, like that happened. Me trying not to spoil things. Every time I rant about a book, I tend to like spoil things, which I've already filmed this video. I already tried filming it like twice or 3 times, but I keep spoiling things, so I have to like refilm it. But yeah, so this book is the one that got me pretty much out of my reading slump and back into reading, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. So the next book I read was Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez. This book is based in the Dominican Republic at the time that they had Trujillo as their dictator, and the main character is Anita de la Torre, and it's about how, I think in the beginning, her uncle is missing. There's certain family members that are having to leave the country for their safety, but her family decides to stay, and she ends up slowly finding out how people in her family are like joining rebellions against Trujillo, and what they do to go against him. Something very big happens like in the middle of the book, and then after that it talks about like how she deals with that big decision that one of her family members made and how it affects like the whole family. This book, I honestly didn't know about that whole dictator Trujillo situation, so from this book I ended up wanting to know more about it, and I researched a little bit about it, tried to like find out what was true and what wasn't. I believe this is fiction. This isn't based on a true story, but like the events that happen are true, if that makes sense. So like these aren't the people who did it, but this did actually happen. Pace is a little bit slower because we're looking at it through her eyes of not knowing what's going on and then finding out slowly through like her sister telling her or her like overhearing things. And then there's something big happens like in the middle of the book, and then after that it's just talking, it's again through her eyes how she's dealing with that big decision. So I wouldn't say it's the quickest pace, but it was still very interesting to read. The next book I read was Surviving the Angel of Death, which is the true story of a Mango twin in Auschwitz. I'm gonna say Mango. I don't think that's how you say his name, but it's about the doctor who did a lot of experiments on twins. I did a little bit of research, and I think his experiments were like on twins, people who had colored eyes, things like that, because he wanted to know like how to reproduce kind of like the perfect human in his eyes. and then through twins, like he wanted to know how to make twins so that they would reproduce even faster, something like that. His experiments were super cruel, super like just disgusting, the things that he did to other humans. But this is a story about one of the twins. Her name is Ava, and her sister's name is Mariana. And so it kind of starts off just explaining what their life was before, what their life was when they were taken to Auschwitz, how they were separated from their family but kept with each other, obviously, because he wanted to experiment on them together. But she was so determined to stay alive that you'll find out if you read the book, you'll find out like how close she came to death and how she just persevered to stay alive for her sister. So I wouldn't say like pace quick or slow because it's true events. She just talks about like certain times when she was taken for an experiment for him and what she found out. She'll talk about like how she later found out what that experiment was, how it affected their development later on as they were growing up. So it kind of talks like past and present time, like what was happening at that moment, but then what she knows about it in her current moment. So yeah, this is also a really good book. The next book I read was The Librarian of Auschwitz. This book is about, her name is Dita, and she's in Auschwitz, but she's like in one of the camps where they're kind of like allowing a school. I don't remember reading why, or like I don't remember why they were allowed to have that school. I know that it was kind of like it was known that like it was weird that that school was there. I don't remember reading why, and if I did, I don't remember why it is that they're allowed to have this school. Anyways, they are allowed to kind of have like teachers, but they're not allowed books. Like they couldn't bring in books, so when they would, they were like taken from them and burned and stuff. But some of them were actually able to sneak in a couple books, and so Dita is the one that's in charge of hiding the books so that the officers don't find them, and which is like a really dangerous job to have. And then she's also in charge of like letting the teachers and the students check those books out. The only issue I had with this book that made me give it like a lower rating, I gave it like a 3 out of 5, was because it kind of felt like the author maybe had like a lot of interviews or knew a lot of stories about a lot of different stories about different people in Auschwitz, and it almost felt like he, instead of just focusing on this story and kind of perfecting the writing for this story, he wanted to just stuff in like all these other stories, and so some of it like doesn't flow that well, or some of it just kind of feels random. So yeah, I think I gave it like a 3 out of 5. The next book I read was The Silent Patient, and this is my absolute favorite book of the year and probably just in general. So this book is about Alicia, and Alicia kills her husband one night and then stops talking after that. She doesn't talk. She's just mute. And I believe at this time it's been 6 years when Theo Faber, which is a criminal psychotherapist, starts working at the psychiatric unit that she's being held in. And his goal is to have her talk and have her say why she killed her husband. The writing was just so good. I felt like the writing was just so good. I want to reread this just to see like what details I can catch on the second time around. But this is definitely one of those books that like I wish I could reread for the first time again. It was just really good. 5 out of 5. I don't want to talk about it too much because if I start ranting about this book, I give a lot of spoilers away. So that's all I'm going to say about the book, but 5 out of 5, I really recommend you read it. The next book I read was Everything I Never Told You. So it's a family of 5. There's 2 girls, 2 daughters, a son, and then the parents, the mom and the dad. And the one that passed away is the favorite daughter that they had. And so the book goes through like talking about how her being the favorite has affected them, like each person in the family, and how losing her specifically like will affect the family, and it kind of goes into different perspectives of each family member. I think the author did a great job of making me like feel sorry for certain characters, and because of that there's certain scenes that like got under my skin about how the parents act towards them just because they're not the favorite daughter. And so it was a great book. I did read it after The Silent Patient, so I think I was also expecting like a thriller, because there is like the storyline is also kind of like, how did she die? And then the way that she died is not like, it's not a thriller, you know what I mean? So I think because I read it after The Silent Patient, it was just a little bit boring to me, to be completely honest. I think I gave it like a 3 out of 5. The next book I read is In the Time of the Butterflies, and this one is about, again, it's based in the Dominican Republic, and it's about these sisters who end up building a rebellion, and they're called Las Mariposas. That's why it says In the Time of the Butterflies. It follows like how they started to build the rebellion, how each of them like slowly started to get involved, their husbands started to get involved. It does go back in time and tells the story through the sisters' eyes, but then the main story, or like the present time story, is told through one of the sisters' perspectives, because she's the only surviving sister. And so the way it jumps from present time to past time is super interesting, because she kind of talks about it more in a sense of like she wishes that they didn't do it. And then it goes into the past time where where it's like through the other sisters' perspectives, and you see like how important it was for them to actually have done that stuff. So I really enjoyed this book, and I think I gave it like a 4 out of 5. The next book I read is The Happiest Girl in the World, and it's about the Olympic sexual abuse case with Larry Nassar. This one is about a girl named Sarah and her best friend are in gymnastics, and they're kind of being recruited to be in the Olympics. And her best friend has Larry Nassar as her doctor, and ends up saying that she's being sexually abused by him, and she kind of looks to her best friend to back her up, because she knows that like the doctor comes into the room late at night and does like therapy for her late at night. And so she kind of looks to her best friend to back her up, to show that like, yes, he does come into my room late and like he does weird things. And her best friend Sarah doesn't back her up. She says that she's lying. And then it talks about like how the other girl that has been sexually abused starts to leave gymnastics, and that's just not her world anymore, whereas she is super involved with gymnastics, still trying to make it her life, like competing through like super tough injuries, and how that her world revolves around gymnastics still. I gave this book a 2 out of 5 because the author put in a lot of parts that were true. Like, you can look up videos of the trial, and there's this like part where a dad is asking the judge like, give me 5 minutes with him alone or something like that. Things like that, where like that actually happened, like it's facts that happened in the trial and stuff like that, she put in the book. Those parts were the parts that were like interesting to read, or like they tug at your heart, you're really like involved. But the parts that were original to her writing, which was the part of like her and her best friend, I didn't like the writing of so much. So the parts that I did like were factual, and so like I can look that up anywhere else. But then the parts that were original for her writing, I didn't like so much, so I gave it a 2 out of 5. The last book I read was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's about 4 best friends after college, and it mainly follows one of the characters, Jude, but then it kind of also does follow the other 3 and their lives after college. This book is really graphic in certain scenes about abuse, and so I would really say look for trigger warnings if you're wanting to read this book. There was a YouTuber, Noel Gallagher, who talked about how they really hyped this book up, but no one really talked about like how traumatic the reading is. So I would really say look up those trigger warnings, take those trigger warnings serious. I had a really hard time when I was done with the book feeling okay with the fact that like it was so hyped up, but the writing is like really serious and graphic writing. This one, I almost would compare it to if you've ever read A Child Called It, but the issue is that A Child Called It has really graphic scenes, but that's his story, that's his life, that's what happened to him, whereas this one was really graphic and it's fiction. So like I had a really hard time knowing that, But yeah, so that was the last book I read in 2021. So if you made it this far, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. If you read any of these books, comment which one was your favorite. If you've read The Silent Patient, which was my top favorite, let me know what you thought about it, if you liked it or if you didn't. I did read The Maidens this month, so I'll be talking about that in my January wrap-up. Watch out for that video to know my feelings about The Maidens, which is the same author if you didn't know. But yeah, so comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.